In the early 1970s, there were two kinds of news programs in Dallas on television. There was Newsroom, as you've heard, and then there was everything else. Now, you can imagine, as you saw how crazy we looked back then, how young. But all you had to do was just listen to the theme songs, because it opened with Here Comes the Sun and closed with Oh Happy Day. Now, in Dallas, Fort Worth, that was just unheard of. Jim Lehrer was there helping to rewrite the rules of how we were supposed to cover stories. Also at the newsroom desk, as you've seen and heard, was Lee Cullum. Lee broke the rules, and she broke them brilliantly, still is. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lee Cullum and Jim Lehrer. Actually, since we've got chairs, we might as well sit.
May as well, yeah. They said we couldn't sit. I'm awfully pleased.
Well, I mean, this is really for another segment, but Luke started it out, you know, and so we got it.
Yes, and thank you, Luke, for the kind words. That was very nice.
And Lee, we of course, we were talking about Bob and Ralph. You two certainly knew Bob very well.
Oh, that's true. You know, when I think of Bob Wilson and Ralph Rogers, I think, of course, of Newsroom, Jim, but I think also of Sesame Street, which Mr. Rogers really loved. He loved Big Bird more than he loved us. You saw him hugging Big Bird, not us. Maybe you remember a song from Sesame Street which went like this: one of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you guess which thing is not like the other before I finish my song? Well, I have some words that describe Bob Wilson, and I want you to see which one doesn't belong. They're all I words. They begin with I. Intelligent, innovative, of course. Imaginative, insouciant. Inexhaustible, incorruptible, iconoclastic, and Irish. Can you guess either which one doesn't belong?
Golly, Lee.
Well, I'll tell you, it's insouciant. I looked up insouciant.
It had to be that one, because I didn't know what that was. So,
I didn't either. I thought it sounded great. I looked it up, but it means carefree and indifferent. No Irishman is ever indifferent to the world around him. Bob has always been passionate about his work, passionate about his play, passionate about his opinions. David McCullough was right. And you know, he used to be fond of quoting Newt Minow, who you cite in your book, Tension City. Newton Minow, when he was chairman of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, often said that too much commercial television was chewing gum for the eyes. So that, Bob went in for strong opinions. That's why he's always been so much fun. And I'll bet you heard a few of those opinions, Jim.
I heard one or two, yes, indeed. I am truly one of those people, the other people here in this room, who can honestly say I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Bobby Wilson. He called me. We didn't know each other that well at the time. Kate and Laura and Bob and I were social friends. And Bob got the word that I was leaving the Times Herald to write novels full time. And Bobby called me and he said, I got a deal for you. Let me see if I can make you understand it's a good deal for you. And that was to come to KERA, and it says in the tape, to be a consultant for news and public affairs programming. And I said, do you do any? And he said, no. And he said, that's why we need a consultant. Come ahead and let's do some. And I said, you know, Bobby, there's one thing you need to understand. You know, I don't really watch television. And he said, you know something, I don't either. And I said, well, I don't know anything about it. And he said, well, you know, I don't either. And he said, but we could do this together. We can figure this thing out. And I said, okay. And but there's one, and then we talked some more about, you know, we had already hit it off, but weren't that close friends at that point. And he told me the story, which is a little counter to Luke's story about the television sets in the Wilson home. What he said to me on the phone was, because we were talking about watching television. He said, well, you know, I'll tell you, there was kind of a little bit of a break before. He said, well, let me just tell you the truth of the matter. He said, we've got some little boys in our house, and they take the knobs off the TV set all the time, and we can't turn them off and on. And does that ring any bells with you guys? Anyhow, Bob Wilson we all have people in our lives, at least I hope we all have people in our lives, at least I have a person in my life who truly came along and touched me at a time that literally changed my life. Because that phone call with Bob Wilson, I said yes to that job. I was only going to have to work 2 days a week, and we were going to talk about doing public affairs programming. And then Bobby had the idea that started everything. It was his idea. It wasn't Ralph Rogers' idea. It sure as hell wasn't my idea. It wasn't anybody's idea but Bobby's. And that is, they had started an innovative news program in San Francisco because of a newspaper strike. Let's see if we could do it in Dallas. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, let's go to San Francisco and take a look. We went out there and looked. And then he said, now, Jim, why don't you write a proposal? The Ford Foundation, maybe they'll fund it. And so I wrote a proposal, and Ralph Rogers went with us, with Bobby and me, to New York, and we talked to Fred Friendly, and lo and behold, he funded the program. We needed some local funding to go with it, and Sam Wiley agreed to put up, his foundation agreed to put up a little extra money that we needed in order to qualify for the thing, but it was all Bobby. And what Bobby did, and we'll talk about, about Ralph. You want to talk about, Ralph's involved, but I never called him Ralph, by the way.
No.
and Bobby and I used to joke about all that, because we heard somebody call Ralph Rogers Ralph. And we looked at you. I mean, that would be like calling the Pope Sam or something like that. And at any rate, that's how it all got started. It all got started for me, and not only for me, but for an awful lot of other people who, because all these things grow, and they grew from that man's ideas and that man's energy that spread like tentacles that are still living to this very day in broadcast journalism where it counts, which is in public broadcasting.
And Bob brought Lee Fikes in also, the Fikes Foundation came in as a funder of Newsroom, and we were grateful for that.
But Lee, what was it like working for this man around that table?
Oh, my word, working for Jim was wonderful. Really wonderful.
That's what I thought
I think the most important thing about Jim Lehrer is his integrity. Absolute integrity. And you took journalism, the journalism of Charlie Hecht and the Front Page people, and you made it. Who was it? Who wrote Front Page? Helen Hayes' husband.
Ben Hecht.
Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur. That's it. You took what was kind of hack work and you made it a profession.
Yeah, but this is not about me tonight.
Okay.
Because without people like Bobby Wilson and Ralph Rogers, you can have all the ideas in the world, you have all the integrity in the world, you have all the great journalism things, and without enablers, without folks who believe in what these other people are doing and allow them to do it, it would never have happened. For instance, in Ralph Rogers' case, one of the things that Bobby, and of course Bobby was saying, you got to tell Mr. Rogers what it means. You're going to have a nightly news program. It's not going to be a bed of roses here. Some of the Dallas business people may not like what you're going to do. And you tell him. I said, okay, Bobby, I'll tell him. And so I told him, and I said, you got to think of yourself as a newspaper publisher, and he said, what is this? Mr. Rogers said, he said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, sir, what it means is you will make absolutely no decisions. You'll have absolutely no input into the news operation. He said, now, wait a minute. I'm the chairman of the board of the, and I said, I realize that, but it's not Texas Industries, it's KERA, this is a news organization, I am the boss. Bobby's looking at me, he's the boss. So, make a long story short, about 3 weeks into our program, I know Lee remembers this, we had a story that involved, I won't tell you the whole story, but it involved a name of a very prominent Dallas businessman at the time. If I told you the name, everybody in this room would know who it was, who we had a story that he did not want run on the NewsHour. And, I mean, the newsroom, sorry. How easy do they forget, yes. And Mr. Rogers called me. And he said, well, look, I've just got a call from Wawa. And he wants to wait on that story. It was about buying some property in downtown Dallas. And they were buying up the property to do some developing downtown. And he doesn't want to do it now. He wants to wait 3 weeks and so he can announce it. Okay. I said, Mr. Rogers, no, that's not okay. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, sir, we're going to run the story tonight. And he said, no. He said, it's got to be, it's going to run. I said, Mr. Rogers, remember our conversation before? He said, are you telling me you're going to run this story tonight? And even despite the fact that Wawa called and all this and all these, I said, yes, sir, I'm telling you that's what we're going to do. And he said, well. We ran the story. He called me the very next morning. He said, that was a mistake. You shouldn't have done that. And I said, Mr. Rogers, now that call is fine. You can call me afterward and tell me anything you want afterward. He said, okay, now I've told you everything's fine. Anyhow, but it was the beginning of, and see if that let's say it hadn't, let's say Rogers had said, Mr. Rogers, see, I almost, lost it there. If Mr. Rogers had said, okay, and now you must do that or you're out of here, then that would have been the end of Newsroom. That would have been the end of all of news everything on KERA, and the whole thing would not have worked.
Well, listen, to the two of you, thank you for all you've done. But Lee, I want to especially say to you, because you brought me on.
That's right.
With that same
Very good
integrity.
move. Very good move.
And I'm forever grateful.
Good.
Thank these two
Thank
great
you.
people. Thank you very much.